I'd like to call to order the regular board meeting of Buchanan Community Schools. And we'd like to welcome you to our meeting this lovely November 15th. And all of our meetings have been posted on our district website and our central office in each district building. And tonight's agenda has been posted on our website as well and emailed out to each board member ahead of time so that they can properly prepare for the meeting. That way they can be well informed, prepared to make comments or questions, as well as being able to fully participate in the votes that come about with the duties of their office. Again, this is a meeting of the Board of Education for the public purpose of conducting the school district's business. It is not considered a public community meeting. There is a time for that during the meeting as indicated in agenda item H. And of course, if you wish to make a presentation, there is a speaker card that needs to be completed and passed to the front to the president. With that said, let's go ahead and have roll call.
That's me, sorry. Mr. Lee.
Here.
Mrs. Berry here. Mr. Carlson.
Here.
Mrs. Lesh is absent. Dr. Carlin.
Here.
Mrs. Ryder.
Here.
Dr. Burnett.
Here. Moving on to the adoption of the agenda, may we have a motion, please?
I motion the agenda for the board meeting of November 15th, 2021 be adopted as written.
Support.
All right, roll call.
Mr. Lee.
Yes.
Mrs. Berry, yes. Mr. Carlson.
Yes.
Dr. Carlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Ryder.
Yes.
Dr. Burnett.
Yes. All right, moving on to item D, recognition of visitors. And Ms. Robinson, any special visitors?
I do not have any special visitors, but I do welcome all of our community members who are here tonight.
Okay, very good. Moving on to item E, presentations.
So tonight we do have Mrs. Shelby Beasley, who is the principal of Buchanan Middle School. She has her presentation for the school highlight of the month.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Superintendent Robinson, members of the board and community. It is my pleasure to be here tonight to talk about one of my most favorite things in the world. And I'm going to be discussing the restorative practices that we have been using at Buchanan Middle School. And so I'm going to be talking about three major things when it comes to the restorative practices at our school. First of all, what does that mean? What are restorative practices? I'm going to talk about the circle process and then a little bit about circles at Buchanan Middle School. So first and foremost, I love that I get to come talk about this tonight, being that this is the month of November and it is Native American Heritage Month. All practices in restorative practice, including circles, come from what we have learned from Indigenous people and their wisdom traditions. And so it's very important that we always acknowledge that these are things that we have learned from them and we are grateful for them sharing their wisdom with us. You will see throughout this presentation a link there, and I'll send this to you so you have a copy of the links and can see everything. There's something called Living Justice Press, and it is a non-for-profit organization that is spreading the good word about restorative practices. Kay Pranis is one of the heads with Living Justice Press, and she was actually invited by Native American groups in Minnesota to learn about circle practice and some of these restorative procedures and proceedings and things like that. And then she took it back to the court system, with their permission, of course, to the court system to try, and to the schools, to try to reduce exclusionary discipline and try to have a really positive impact on the school to prison pipeline that was happening in Minnesota at the time. So a couple other things about what restorative practices are. I'm not one of those people that will read the slides, so there are some things up there for you to look at, but for everyone at home, what restorative practices are in a nutshell is an alternative way of looking at how we communicate in school, how we deal with discipline in school, and it really is a paradigm shift in mindset to try to reduce the number of exclusionary discipline. Students aren't going to learn if students are not in class. Students are also not going to learn if they don't have relationships with those that are teaching them. So the big three from the Little Book of Restorative Justice in Education, one of my favorite books about restorative justice, is these practices create just and equitable learning environments, they nurture healthy relationships, and they help repair harm and transform conflict. It's especially important with adolescents because adolescents can be a little bit self-centered. And so these circle practices and restorative practices help all individual voices come together as part of a community because we are all connected. This is one of my favorite visuals when it comes to restorative practices, kind of breaks down 5 of the big components of it. But like I said before, it's all about building positive relationships, having students discuss how they feel about how they've been, like if there is some sort of harm that has happened, resolving conflict in a different way. And it really, when we get down to talking about circle process, helps students learn how to communicate. Because when we communicate, we speak, but we also listen. And when you have adolescents, those middle school children, sometimes they don't love the listening aspect, or they listen with intent to respond. And that is something that we really help them learn, that you don't always have to listen with and have a response right away. So the 2 major practices of restorative practice that we use at Buchanan Middle School are restorative chats and circle processes. When it comes to those restorative chats, it is usually maybe a teacher, myself, or it could be Mr. Franzak, our Dean of Students, and then a student come together for just a quick informal conversation if something went wrong in a classroom. Let's say a student gets kind of in trouble because they had some sort of disrespectful behavior. Nothing major, worthy of suspension or anything like that, or that had to do with student safety, but still something that needs to be addressed. It is a more powerful conversation when you use the effective statements that are used in these chats that have to do with, when this happened, I felt, or when you said, it made me feel. And it just allows everybody to kind of get everything out on the table and hear all voices. We use certain questions with the person that potentially caused the harm, and we always start with what happened. It's never a why did you do this, but what happened. What happened? That's always what I say, no matter what. If there's ever a kid crying, anything, you'll hear me say what happened all the time. So I'll say, what happened? What were you thinking about at the time? What have you thought of since? Who was affected by what happened? How were they affected? And then what do we need to do to make things right? But we also have that conversation ahead of time with that student before coming into those meetings so they can kind of get their little answers ready there and kind of think about those things. And we also have the other side, the other party involved, has a couple of questions that we ask them, like what happened, right? We always start with that. What were you thinking about at the time? What have you thought of since? Who else was affected and how were they affected? What was the hardest part for you? And then what do we need to do to make things right? So like I said, these conversations happen between, maybe it's something that happened in the classroom. A lot of times it's with myself and 2 students. If there was some sort of conflict with 2 students, these questions really create a powerful conversation where harm can be shared, the harm that was happened, and then we can move forward with a collective understanding of what we need to do to make things right, to make sure that it hopefully does not happen again. And then the other process we use at Buchanan Middle School are circle processes. And that is something that is inspired by Indigenous people of North America. And the real big purpose for those is to hear all voices and build a community and shared understanding. So we're going to switch gears to talk about circles. As I said before, it is always extremely important to acknowledge that these learnings about circles that we have taken away, that's the wrong words. We have taken away the learnings that we've had from these different traditions and practices that the Native Americans hold very dear to their hearts. To them, this is not just something we do in school. It is something that is truly a way of life. And I had the absolute honor to sit with 2 people last week from the Pokagon Band of the Potawatomi, Rebecca Williams and Jason Weesaw, and we discussed how I'm using circles at Buchanan Middle School. I wanted to make sure that I was very sensitive to their culture. Are we doing the right thing here? Is there anything, how do you feel about what we're doing? And just start creating a really, really important partnership with them and with the people that have their same beliefs and those same traditions. And so we're going to be working in partnership with them pretty soon. I know that Jason's going to be coming to our school and leading some staff through a few things. It was kind of funny because I sat down with a couple things that I wanted to talk about with them, and one of them was this graphic that I've learned from my own personal training that I went to with Kay Pranis, author of this book, which is Circle Forward. All of my teachers that have had the same training have been trained with this book. And restorative justice circles talk about balancing all parts of who we are. So we have emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual. In school, the difference between this graphic, which is what we use with schools that has been adapted from indigenous practice, and the medicine wheel that my friends the other day brought to share with me, is the spiritual part is not necessarily part of school, except for we do talk about values. We did a lot of work last year during February about values, because if you asked a middle school kid what a value is, they probably would be like, what do you mean how much something is? $5? Not exactly what it is. And so all of these things in this wheel discuss kind of the balance of who we are as individuals and what we bring to our community. There's 3 different tiers of circles, just as there's 3 different tiers of instruction. Half of our staff and Mr. Franzak and I and many in our, who else? Our media center specialists have been trained in Tier 1. And those circles are about building relationships. So creating community, talking circles. If you have curriculum circles, sometimes teachers use them for learning, like if you're having a great conversation about the rock cycle. We just had a teacher that was doing something similar in her class, but those are just the basic Tier 1. When you go up to Tier 2, I've had Tier 2 training. When you get to the problem solving and the actual repair of harm work, and then when you get to Tier 3, that's when you get into more severe type circumstances, and that could be circles welcoming back members into the community after an extended suspension, after an expulsion, or in some cases, perhaps after being at the Student Judicial Center or something like that. But those circles are very intensive, and I'm heading to training on those later this year. I'm very excited about that. But we use the majority at our school right now are Tier 1 circles. So just a general idea, I wish that I was being able to lead this with you guys right now in circle, just so you could have, and invite all of you too, just so you could actually see what it feels like, because I could talk all day about it, but until you actually experience the circle, you don't quite understand the impact that it could have. So first and foremost, there's always consensus. Everybody has to be willing to come to circle. You cannot force anyone to go. It is always voluntary. So when we do have these in class, students are always told, you do not have to come to circle. Okay, you don't have to sit with us in the circle. You do not have to participate. You could sit at your desk without judgment. There is never any judgment, never any consequence or anything for that. So then everybody's welcome to the circle. Thank you for coming. There's an opening ceremony that typically involves a quotation or some song lyrics, or it could be a short story that would go along with the subject of the circle, which is also talked about in the opening ceremony. And then you do the guidelines, which are kind of the base. We don't like to say rules. It's guidelines, because sometimes, it reminds me of Pirates of the Caribbean when he says, they're more like guidelines anyways. But it's just, we don't want, it's not set in stone, because it's something that we can always change if we feel there's a need to change. And then they always discuss values. What value are you yourself bringing to the whole circle? Because if you think about a circle, there's not a point. So even though there is a keeper of the circle, which with students would be the teacher is typically the keeper, that person is not more important than anybody else in the circle, and everybody gets to have a voice. Also in the circle, in the center, there's typically a centerpiece of some sort. It usually has to do with a cloth that is placed in the middle, and then objects. The objects can be anything that are important to the circle keeper. Typically, there is something from nature to pay respect to how we did learn this from indigenous populations. There's usually some sort of pot or vessel or something that can catch our thoughts. And then there's other little tidbits. There might be quote signs, might be cute little things. I know that when I do it, I collect zebra print items, so there's a zebra that I always bring in. Just kind of just reflects me. And then we always place, if you can see the picture there, there's guidelines on one paper, and then the values that are the typical values of circle practice there. I've also been part of circles where everyone was asked to bring something to place in the centerpiece, so that's kind of fun, because then they have ownership in the circle. The point of the center is to give everybody a focal point to look at. Eye contact is difficult, especially for adolescent kids. They don't like it. They don't want to look at you when they're talking, so it gives everybody a place to focus on, and it's an agreed understanding that you don't necessarily have to look at each other when you're talking, but you're still able to actively listen. So going back to the circle format, after the entire opening ceremony, discussion of guidelines and values, you have rounds. And a round is where you start with an opening round, just a general, like, how are you today? And you pass a talking piece. So the big point of this circle is when you have the talking piece, you're invited to talk. We talk a lot about speaking from the heart, speaking your truth. And then when you do not have it, you're invited to listen, and you listen without judgment and without the need to respond. That's the big one. And that's hard as an adult, too. You really have to think about when you have a conversation with one of your friends, are you listening and listening genuinely, or are you listening and trying to think of what you're going to say? And so that just talks about how we teach those kiddos how to communicate a little bit better. You can always pass. You never have to speak. Everything, anything, including participation, is always voluntary. We do have many students that pass every single time, and there's no judgment, there's no consequence to that. That is them, but they are there. They are still part of us, and they're listening. So in step 3 and 4, rounds can be, typically are questions that have to do with the subject. For example, if we had a classroom that was having, the middle school drama, people not necessarily being nice to one another, we might hold a circle about friendship. And that might be the purpose of the circle. So we're going to discuss things like, how does someone show they are your friend? Tell us a time when you were a good friend to someone. What qualities make a good friend? And the talking piece is passed around the circle. And then in step 4, it talks about coming to a consensus or an understanding. And then that class could say, all right, let's summarize what we talked about today. A good friend would X, Y, and Z. So that's what we're going to really work on these next couple weeks when we're interacting with each other, of making sure as friends we are doing these things, and to come up with the shared understanding. And then you have your closing, which is usually a checkout round. I always say, how was circle for you today? And it's always really, really interesting to see how students answer that. I typically like to have them answer in one word. And sometimes they just absolutely blow you away with the words that they come up with how circle are. They're so profound. And we're talking about 10, 11, and 12-year-olds here. And then you have a closing quote. So there is a video here. I'm not going to play it because of time, but I would invite anyone to look this up. You can find it on YouTube. It is Restorative Justice in Oakland Schools, Tier 1, and it shows you a community building circle. And the young lady in the middle kind of walks you through exactly what that would look like. And she is keeping. She's a student, but she is a keeper, a circle keeper. Uh-oh, is it going to play? Phil? There we go. Okay, so thanks. So what these look like at Buchanan Middle School, I just put a couple pictures up here for you. Half of our staff is currently trained in Tier 1 circles. That's the community building circles. The other half is going to be trained in February. Mr. Franzak also leads circles, and as does Ms. Young, who is our media center specialist. I've also sent an interventionist to the training. So everybody else that has not had the training, whether they're certified or non-certified, will be invited to attend the training in February. Just like everything, it's voluntary. You're invited to go, but this is not something that you are forced to do. You can see we've got multiple students here sitting in our circle. There's you've got the circles in action. Mrs. Jeffries, Mrs. Luke, and Miss Lee have been trained, and they do them. Those are the classes pictured here, and they do them regularly. What you might not see is in the top right picture. That is in Mrs. Luke's class, and Mrs. Jeffries also attends as a co-keeper. So that's on her own plan time. She willingly goes in from time to time if they're having circle that day, just to participate and help co-keep the circle. Here's just some more pictures. You can see in the bottom right corner that there is a student that is leading the circle for that round. She is the circle keeper with the help of the teacher, of course. It is our goal to hopefully help students write their own circles and help them lead them eventually. It's very, very powerful when they come up with the topics and they come up with the questions and they have a little bit more ownership, and you really get a lot of great conversations. I asked a lot of the students how circles make them feel. An overpowering amount of people said safe, so that's why I put that up top. I love the one that says, it is kind of weird, but I kind of like it. There has never been a more middle school response than that one right there. But if you read through some of those, it's just that everybody really likes that they can speak their truth and feel like they're respected. We really see a lot of people open up that don't necessarily open up before. I said that I wasn't going to read to you, but the power in this quote, I feel like I need to. It says, I think they are helpful because as we grow up in middle school, and especially young teenagers don't open up to people as much as they would in elementary school. I think from the circles in science, there are some people that I have never seen open up in a long time, starting to talk to people and express their feelings. What a profound wisdom statement from somebody who's 11. And that is someone who's only been doing circles since the start of this school year. So it really is making an impact. Here are a couple things of what they like about circles. And it says up there, I like that we get a chance to speak. Adolescents love to feel heard. That is extremely important to them. So this, whether you're using circles or just those restorative conversations, gives them a chance to speak. And then the bottom one, connecting with one another, that is the entire purpose. And it just shows that even though they are of such a young age, they're understanding that we are all interconnected. It's one of the core assumptions that we have about humanity. This is one more quote for you. It makes you feel like you can share things and nobody will judge you with it. I have been through a lot this year, and Circle has helped me open up. I really like it and think we should do it more often. That's another 6th grade student. So talking about what's next, like I said before, we're going to continue building partnerships with the Pokagon Band of the Potawatomi. I am looking very much forward to having Jason come to our staff professional development. I am going to go up there to do a site visit with them. The rest of the staff will have Tier 1 training. Mr. Franzak is going to repair of harm training. I'm off to Tier 3. We're going to continue to help students become circle keepers if they want. Remember, it's all voluntary. I'm toying with the idea of possibly doing an after-school club, which would help students be trained in actually how to run circles. I'd like to hold staff circles more often. Those would for sure be voluntary, but it is definitely, my staff calls it therapeutic. And we get to know each other on a different level than we ever have before, so I'd like to increase those. And then we're going to come up with our own circle collection. So as staff write circles for what they need to in class, whether it be curricular, or if it's just different character traits or things with behavior or things that need to be addressed in adolescent world, we're going to create a collection of that. And then, of course, when the students start to write their own, we'll have a student collection of circles. And then these are just some excellent resources that I would recommend. That was a lot in a very short period of time about something I could talk for hours on. Does anybody have any questions?
I'd like to thank you, Shelby, and this is Native American Heritage Month. And from my Ojibwe people, we thank you for sharing this.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure.
Quick question. Have you had a chance to share this information with staff from other schools or
In the
Last-
district, this
Yes.
district, not, they know my love for it.
Okay.
Probably till they're blue in the face. They've heard me speak of it, and that's why I'm here tonight. But that's in process. You know, we've got a lot going on right now. We're a heavy focus on PLCs. And so it is definitely something that I'm interested in sharing. But, you know, you got to go slow to go fast. So.
I would just like to add that in 5th grade, the students learn about indigenous peoples, and so this puts relevance to the social studies lesson on a very personal way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shelby.
Thank you.
So we have next some team updates. We have several of our team members either absent today or just unable to share their updates, but their updates are in our packets for you to review. And then we'll have Mr. Curlin, and then I have a short one after him.
All right, good evening. I'm here, welcome to everyone. I'm Mark Cronin, the Assistant Superintendent. I'm here to talk about the Hill Ottawa projects that we have going on, and specifically to deal with instructional rounds. And I know that looking through the recap that the principals turned in, that they kind of got a little more specific as to the outcomes and so on, but I just kind of want to talk about real quick about the process and what was involved with the instructional rounds. For those of you that are new to the board, we started the Hill project 3 years ago at Moccasin. It came in when Dr. Andrea was the superintendent and Stacy Dennison was the principal as she was moving to Ottawa. And Dr. Dunn came in. He took over and ran with it with the Hill project at Moccasin. And then Stacy and I kind of talked and kind of worked out to where Mark Tompkins, who's the person spearheading that from the Hill project, kind of worked with Ottawa and kind of brought them along slowly. And then last year, we set aside some title money to officially have Ottawa work with what I call the Ottawa project, doing the same type of things that the Hill project is doing, and then we continued it on this year. So when we're talking about instructional rounds, I think you have to think about or look at it from the standpoint that we're having some outside people come in and look at what's being done in the building from a literacy standpoint, and the instructional rounds has 2 teams. And then each member of those teams has a job, and so actually I went through I was on the Ottawa team, and Trish was on the Moccasin team. But when you're part of that team, you have someone that's looking at content, someone's looking at what the teacher's doing, someone's looking at what the students are doing, and then the context of what the room looks like. And so you look at the Moccasin team had some people from the Hill projects, some administrators from other districts, some teachers from other districts. The Ottawa team had some administrators from BRESA and teachers from different buildings and so on come in. So it's a well-rounded group of people that come in and look, and I think that's important that you're getting input, feedback from people that aren't actually in the district. The second phase, so we spent 15 minutes in each classroom, and so I was on the first group that went into the kindergarten room, and I was in 2 classrooms. The other team was in 3 classrooms, and then it flipped to the first grade. The second part of the process is an actual interview with the grade level teams, and that interview with the grade level teams is with the instructional round team minus the administrator from that building and the literacy coach. So the Mark would lead them through some questions specifically on what was going well, what could be improved, and then, you know, if they had a magic wand, what would they need to fix what was going on. So they had a chance to express the positives and their concerns to the committee or to the team. Then after that, the team would sit down minus the teacher. Okay, that's when the administrator and literacy coach comes back in, depending on what team they were on. They would talk about the celebrations, look at individual data, okay, talk about each group, each team. There were 2 teams in each building. They would talk about what they saw, identify some themes, talk about, and then there would be a large group that would share, okay, and then there would be a small group discussion with that team on what are some growth edges that each building could look at. The last part of that is, of the process in my mind, would be is they took that information back to the staff meeting, maybe a 45 to 60-minute staff meeting. They would talk about how the day went, they would share the celebrations, and then they would review the growth edges that they would be looking at. I forgot to go through, sorry. So Ottawa instructional rounds, just a couple points that I'll stress that came out of that. There's a big list there, and you have them in your packet. Just strong evidence of student engagement, examples in small group and large group. They're aligned to using new common instructional methods and routines from Haggerty and some of the foundation materials that we purchased as to pilot. Lots of teacher collaboration, PLCs in place, and then a big thing that Ottawa put in place this year that their teachers wanted when working with Stacy and Wendy is that they wanted to set aside specific time for ELA, so they have 120 minutes of uninterrupted instructional time. Whereas in the past, maybe some kids were pulled out for intervention during that time. They have it locked in to where nobody's coming and going from an intervention standpoint, which helps because kids aren't supposed to lose their intervention or use their instructional time. And then their ongoing exposure to the science of reading. The growth edges, what came out of that from that committee is to continue on with your gold standard in PLC and keep using the science of reading materials that was discussed at our curriculum committee. And then from Moccasin standpoint with Dr. Dunn and his staff and Casey Macbeth, literacy coach, again, strong PLCs and collaboration. One-to-one technology being used, common assessments, looking at that data, high in place, high levels of student engagement in large group activities and tasks, and then example of anchor charts being used in the classrooms. Okay. Again, there was lots of other positives in there, but just wanted to stress some of those. Their growth edges or recommendations is just to continue this working towards the gold standard in PLC. They have spent tons and tons of time of working with PLCs and looking at data and so on, and then also incorporating and continuing to work with the Writing Revolution that they're doing across the building. So just a lot of work, again, with PLCs in the district and then looking specifically at how to improve literacy at the elementary level, and high praise to Dr. Dunn and his staff and Stacy Dennison and her staff of what they've been doing over the last 3 years. So any questions that you have?
At the bottom there, you say examples of anchor charts. What is that exactly?
That would be some specific charts that they're using to kind of incorporate into literacy where the kids are involved in building those anchor charts and things that are important for them to look at what they're reading and so on. So the kids have some buy-in. And that was one of the big things that we kind of talked about from a team standpoint, is kind of looking at what the context of the room looked like when you went in there. What did the bulletin boards look like? Is it a collage of stuff all over, or is it very specific depending on the color? There's research out there, kind of like what colors work with kids, how are things organized, and things like that. So from my standpoint, when I was at the middle school, we did a lot of observations where teachers looked at staff, went in and watched other teachers teach just to kind of get an idea. But this was kind of going one step further. We're having people come in from outside the district, which I think is important. So, any other questions?
So that's the 120 minutes. That's on a daily basis
Yep.
in both schools. So both Ottawa and Moccasin, you're referring
I
to?
think Moccasin has more,
I don't think at Moccasin it's quite 90 minutes.
90.
Okay.
Okay.
And you just try to minimize, the goal is to minimize students leaving for any reason during that time.
Yes.
That's
Yep.
great.
I think one thing that they've worked very hard on in both buildings is trying to have a lot of the interventions done actually in the classroom with the classroom teachers. So we get that tier 1 instruction, we get that 2-tier instruction by the teacher in the classroom, and then obviously we still have interventionists to support.
Great,
All
thank
right,
you.
anything else?
I was just going to say, I think it's great when teachers can go into other classrooms and see teachers teach. I know I did that in this room, and I learned so much from other teachers by watching them. So I applaud you for that opportunity that you're giving the teachers. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curlin.
the last one is just wanted to give a couple of updates from me. I wanted to share just a little bit of my goal updates. One of the goals for me was to create a process to plan and attract and retain students and staff. So what we are doing, I just want to make sure that we are doing the exit interviews when people, our staff leave. We are also, I don't have a clicker, so I can't. So, we are also surveying our students who are of school of choice. That's one of the things that we want to do as well. And then we are working on some recruitment videos. We did one already. We are moving forward with that as well. And then a goal that we have eventually is to have, I don't even know if it'll work over here. It may not, and that's not mine. Anyway, that's not mine. So is to have our staff attend some recruitment fairs. So we are working towards that. And then also, one of the things that we are working towards now is some staff incentives, self-care, and then I really want to get some notes out to our staff to just really show that we care, we appreciate what they're doing as well. So wanted to share that with you guys. And then also, just around the district this past month, we held high school and middle school student advisory sessions. It was really cute, small, intimate groups. However, they were very forthright in what the needs are, and what they feel that the needs were. And the district gave me lots of ideas. One of them wants a fall break. And then just also ways to help. So a lot of information came out from those groups at the high school and the middle school, so we're looking forward to those sessions again next month. And then I did hold our superintendent and bug conversations with parents. It was held here this month, and generated some more conversations as well. I participated in the instructional round at Moccasin, which was extreme. It was phenomenal. I appreciate the welcoming stance that Mr. Dunn, Dr. Dunn had too at his, and I think eventually that should be moved throughout the district. So that'll be a long-term goal. 5 years from now, I don't know. However, it is a long-term goal. We participated in facility walkthroughs, Mark and I, along with Al, and then also we just recently finalized some calendar revisions. So after listening to several groups in our staff, teachers, administrators, some committees, and learning just, how are things going? What do you need? What was very evident is that we do need to make sure that we're taking care of our staff in some way, shape, or form. So what that did cause us to do is look at our calendar to see what revisions, what can we do to provide our staff with some sort of reprieve during this time. It is tough right now. And so what we came up with was utilizing some flexibility that our state gives us with using our professional development days as a full day of instruction. So we are going to recommend to you tonight some revisions, and one of them is to have our full day off Wednesday, November 24th. And then also December 1st, we're going to change that to a full day of instruction for students. And then I think our next one is February 18th. We're asking for that to be a full day off. March 18th as well to be a full day off, and then March 9th to be a full day of instruction. So we wanted to do some revisions. Hopefully it will help parents and then also give reprieve to our staff. We communicated this information to the union, so the Buchanan Education Association. We met with them. We met with also the newly created Professional Development Advisory Committee as well. I joined in with Mark this afternoon with meeting with that committee that was composed of teachers, administrators, parents, as we went through this information as well. And then we've also shared this information with our auditor as well. So just lots of levels to get this done very quickly. I appreciate the staff coming together as much as they did, as quickly as they did to get this done. So the recommendation is in your packet. And then also in your you have access to the, to my PowerPoint. So my last one is just a reminder to our community that I am holding the parents, the BUT conversations. They're open. Nothing is really prepared. You come, you share your thoughts, concerns, or whatever with me. Our next one is December 8th, and that'll be held at the Buchanan Middle School. And then also, I want to remind our parents to, if you want to join in on the Parent Advisory Committee, there is a link out there. You please do join. We are looking for lots of families and parents to join that. And then the last one is just a couple of pictures that I have around the district. The first one is a picture of the opening of the Buchanan Middle School Union, credit union. So I participated in that, and we had someone from Kim Lasada's office there to speak as well. Thank you to Honor Credit Union for doing this for us. And then there is a picture in the middle, just of a student who was caught reading in the middle in the hallway in the stairwell. The teacher of this student shared with the principal that this was a celebration, a student who you wouldn't think would just take a moment to read, but it was a moment to take and celebrate. And I'm happy that the teacher shared it with the principal. And then just the last snapshot is a picture of me and the two parents who came to the Parent Advisory Committee, so, for the open conversation. So appreciate that. Lots of work. Things that we've done, and the team has been great. So, and then I just appreciate our group being able to respond in a positive manner to our staff and to our needs.
Very good, thank you.
Is this a time that you want to have questions on anything you just presented, Trish?
Yes, it can be.
So I was just curious, when you mentioned the teachers signed off on your proposed calendar adjustments, how did that conversation go, and was it welcomed pretty quickly, or was there a lot of negotiations in this?
Not a lot. So Mark and I we sat together first to kind of develop what is this? And so it initiated from a conversation that I had with the small teacher group, and I walked into the room and I asked the teacher, well, how are you doing? This is a long haul, it's a lot. And so triggered a lot of things in my mind. And then from there, just kind of their input about, there's so many half days. There's a lot of PD. And on top of that, we're dealing with, quarantines, just everything that's there, that's kind of making this, just overwhelmed. So once we went to the union, we presented the proposal. Very little questions, very few questions. They understood the why. They welcomed it. I think, it was all collaborative.
And there were some of those half-day Wednesdays adjusted in there as part of that?
Yeah. And I think the other good part about this was with the creation of the Professional Development Advisory Committee. They'll have members on this team as well. So it's more collaborative, more collaboration too. And then we're starting those conversations, I would hope. We're really working to get our initial meeting with both the union and the Professional Development Advisory Committee in December before we go out on Christmas break, so we can start those conversations.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Okay. I think the next is the Buck Staff Appreciation.
Yes, we do have the winner here, Mrs. Kelly Smith. She is here in the audience. She brought her husband and her newborn baby here, so thank you and congratulations. And I know Dr. Harvey's gonna
Present the
present
certificate? Okay.
the certificate. And then we usually also read the list of, and Mrs. Berry, I don't know if you can read the list of nominees as well.
Yep, and I can also read the nomination for Mrs. Smith.
Yes.
Yep.
Mrs. Smith has already made a huge impact on her first grader. Our son loves coming to school, learning, and helping others in his classroom because she has expected such. Mrs. Smith built such a strong community of little learners these first few weeks of school that our son hasn't had one bit of hesitancy now that she is home with her new baby. So, very nice job.
Congratulations. And Kelly, come on, well, I know you have to come on forward, well.
It's nice to have you in person.
I know.
Yeah.
To the camera. Okay, here you go.
Can you cut?
It's not gonna work. Wait. Oh, wait, the photo. And of course, your husband and baby are out, so they missed that moment. Congratulations.
The other nominees for November were Amanda Horton from Food Service, Anna Smith, High School Administrative Assistant, Cindy Bowerman, Moccasin third grade teacher, David Garland, a fifth grade teacher, Jeanette Wetzel, Food Service, Jennifer Schmidkuns, a bus driver, Josh Wagoner, social studies teacher, Carrie Chase, preschool teacher, Laura Hinkle, Ottawa guidance counselor, Lindsay Haroff, Moccasin second grade teacher, Maggie Patnode, elementary speech and language pathologist, Margaret Cowles, food service, Mary Mitchell, food service, and Melissa Sweeney, food service. So it's wonderful to see so many nominations.
Very good. All right, information reports. Anything there? Other than what's in the packets?
Yeah, our Emergency and Security Committee meeting, we just updated the emergency plan. I did talk about the middle school and high school, that student advisory committees, Human Resources Committee.
I had my notes pulled up. We talked about open positions. We talked a lot about the wellness days and the calendar updates that Trish just discussed, and kind of what we're planning for upcoming and how we generate more applicants. So.
Anything about the open meetings or?
I attended a 2.5-hour meeting on the Open Meetings Act, and there are a few things that we're going to have to look at in terms of policy, but basically we're adhering to all of the rules and regulations, and much of what was discussed involved virtual meetings, and that's going to be a moot point after January 1st, so yeah. It was an interesting meeting, and I know Mrs. Munyon also attended a similar meeting, and we compared notes, and they were basically the same.
Very good. All right, moving on to item H, Community Dialogue Citizens Concerns. And I do have a few cards up here. Just to remind everybody, you have 3 minutes, but also it must be kept respectful. If I feel that it's not being respectful or attacking members of the board, then I will shut down the meeting and we'll continue the meeting after everything calms down. All right? And first card is John Stubblefield.
Good evening, and thank you. Just wanted to express my disappointment for not finding the recital of the Pledge of Allegiance on the agenda this evening. You know, last month we had a really good discussion about the history associated with the Pledge of Allegiance. The fact that it appears that the pledge has not been recited at this meeting for some 20-plus years. Nobody on the board really knew why that was. The discussion that ensued after the history lesson, which I thank you again for, seemed to be either neutral or supportive of it. I didn't hear but only one, maybe what can be defined as a dissension about citing a pledge. What did catch my mind, however, was the fact that it didn't seem to be a real good way of bringing that to conclusion at the meeting. So I just want to direct all of your attention, which I'm sure you know exists, to the policies and guidelines that governs the board's actions. Paragraph 0166, it's called agenda. And that basically says that the superintendent has a responsibility to put the agenda together, and the board members have the responsibility to follow the agenda and use it as a conduct of business for this meeting. Any individual up there can add an item to the agenda at any time with the approval of the president and a majority vote. So it doesn't appear to me to be quote-unquote rocket science to be able to vote on it and come up with a resolution. Now, I do notice on the agenda that the Pledge of Allegiance is on the agenda for another discussion, so perhaps I'm out of line, I don't know, but I needed to say what I wanted to say. We didn't say the Pledge of Allegiance at the start of the meeting, so we will say it now. Anybody who wants to join me in the pledge, please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I really encourage the board to, if you're not already going to do it later in today's meeting, to bring it up to a vote and let us know what your decision is. I can tell you that if the decision is no, we will recite the pledge every night that I'm here. Thanks.
Good. And John, it is on the agenda for a vote, okay? So just to let you know that.
Okay, so I guess I won't apologize. You just said what I wanted to say.
Yeah, okay. Stephanie Fain.
Hi, guys. I'm Stephanie Fain. You have my address on file, as I received a thank you letter for the last one. It was really polite. It reminds me of how unique and our community is. It's very unique, and I think that it's always kind of been inclusive, right, of everybody's rights and personalities and everything like that. I don't know how this is going to go. I'm not great at speaking. All right. I think you need to think a little harder before taking away the parents' rights to their children's medical decisions. A mask is a medical apparatus that is strapped to their face, and it cuts off the oxygen they're able to breathe in, and it's also recycling a lot of bad things that their body is made to expel. It's recycling it back into their bodies, all of these things. And there's lots of experts out there that can attest to that. And I know that you guys just went back to universal masking, correct?
No.
No? I just read that.
For
No.
Ottawa and for the middle school.
For Ottawa and for the middle school. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So I was worried about that masking situation. Am I in the wrong situation for, because my kid should be in first grade. And he is, like, am I here addressing the board that would be over the first graders and all of that? They're masking and they're not masking. Do you guys know?
What is the question?
Is it mandatory or is it a personal choice? Is that,
We have required masking for Ottawa.
you have required masking
Yes,
for Ottawa
for a time
Elementary?
period,
Well,
just
see,
so you know.
okay, well, here's my issue, though. Okay. I knew that a lot of these issues were going to come with the masking and the vaccinations a long time ago. There's been like a million warning signs, and there's a lot of experts that have been shut up about a lot of these issues. There's a lot of controversy around it, but didn't you guys also host a vaccine site here at the schools
Yes,
on the 30th?
yes.
Like, okay, so you pushed the vaccines for some students, and that's still, like, very controversial, that you gave them a site to put these vaccines in people. If they wanted a vaccine, they could have gone and gotten it anywhere. Like, I mean, it's been pushed left and right and everything. Anyways, my problem, though, with getting my son into this community, that I love this community, by the way.
And
It's
Stephanie,
beautiful and
I have to
unique.
cut you off because you're at your
Okay.
3 minutes now.
All right, sorry.
Thank you.
All right, I'll be sending some emails that
Okay.
do pertain to this.
Okay, Julie Legault.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I have some concerns regarding the quarantining of healthy students who are not vaccinated. I feel it's discriminatory. There have been issues the past week with some people, well, I'll just stick with the facts. So, according to the United States Department of Justice, by having healthy students quarantined, this is a deprivation of rights under color of law. Section 242 of Title 18 makes it a crime for a person acting under color of any law to willfully deprive a person of a right or privilege protected by the Constitution or laws of the United States. For the purpose of Section 242, acts under color of law include acts not only done by federal, state, or local officials within their lawful authority, but also acts done beyond the bounds of that official's lawful authority. If the acts are done while the official is purporting or pretending to act to the performance of his or her official duties, and others who are acting as public officials. It is not necessary that the crime be motivated by animus toward the race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, or national origin of the victim. The offense is punishable by a range of imprisonment up to a life term or the death penalty, depending upon the circumstances of the crime and the resulting injury, if any. My child, along with others, are being deprived of their right to a public education by quarantining them because they're not vaccinated. This is also a violation of their constitutional rights under the 14th Amendment, Section 1, which states all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within the jurisdiction equal protection of the laws. There is a recent study called Shedding of Infectious SARS-CoV-2 Despite Vaccination, which destroys the justification for vaccine mandates. I was asked today if my son was vaccinated, and I told the truth and said yes, and because he's not vaccinated, he is now not able to go to school for 10 days because somebody that he sat close to in class was tested positive for COVID. This person, I believe, was vaccinated. I know of another student who was vaccinated and tested positive, and now my son, who's unvaccinated, cannot go to school, nor can one of his teammates and classmates. But kids who are vaccinated are allowed to go to school. This is discrimination.
All right, Julie, I got to cut you off. We're at 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Chris Phillips.
Hi, Chris Phillips. I got 2 daughters in the school system here. I've got one in Ottawa and one in Moccasin. I was addressing the COVID quarantine stuff also. Just straight to the point on it. My daughter is in Mrs. Sears' first grade class, and she was put on quarantine starting Monday. My wife called to find out what was happening with that, and she's got a week off school. That's, it is what it is. But they were going to send her home on the school bus. And to me, this is an issue. If she's too much of a danger to be in class for a week, she probably shouldn't be riding the bus with other students in different schools and other classrooms, exposing them potentially. When she showed up to pick her up, she was clumped in with the other kids outside to be picked up also. So they were all just grouped up There's no quarantining there either. And, I don't know, to me, this just, it doesn't make much sense. I believe this is the body I would want to address on this, so I was bringing it to you. I mean, I don't care either way how you guys go with it, whether it's quarantining or not, but you know, just all the way or no, none, you know? It's, I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to let these children ride the buses together if they're too much of a danger to be in school together. And that's all I've got, I guess, so, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Carla Johnson.
I want to share with you the revised school code, Act 451 of 1976, Section 380.10, Rights of Parents and Legal Guardians, Duties of Public Schools, Section 10. It is the natural fundamental right of parents and legal guardians to determine and direct the care, teaching, and education of their children. The public schools of this state serve the needs of the pupil by cooperating with the pupil's parents and legal guardians to develop the pupil's intellectual capabilities and vocational skills. That does not mean that the CDC tells you what to do with children who should have a choice about whether they wear masks or not. I'm not against wearing a mask. I brought something to show you. It's my N95 respirator mask. And I have this, and if I'm worried about catching COVID, I can wear this mask, and it's probably 99.9% effective. And here's why. Because it has memory foam around the nose, it's adjustable in the ear loops, it has an outer shell made of nylon that's very tightly woven. Inside it has an even tighter weave in the filter, and it has the respirator with filters, which means that I can breathe in and out. I breathe in the air and I breathe out the air. This thing works. And if someone is worried about their child in the school, then they should be given an N95 respirator mask for that child. If a parent thinks their child is safe without a mask, or if the child has issues with wearing a mask, then the child wearing the N95 isn't going to catch anything from them. So I can't understand the logic of the mandate. I'm a hypochondriac. I have this mask because I don't want to catch colds, flu, or anything, and I taught for years, and I know what it's like to be a teacher.
Carla, we're at the end of time. Thank you.
Okay, get a mask like this one.
And Don Ryman. Yes, I said Don Ryman. Don.
On September 1, 1939, the German dictator in power from 1933 to 1945 attacked Poland and started World War II, which resulted in 45 million deaths, including 5 of my high school classmates and Sunday school classmates. Among the dictator's atrocities was medical experimentation on Jews and other people considered non-persons, which resulted in death or permanent disability to many of these people. At the Nuremberg Tribunal in 1946, which punished the survivors of those responsible for World War II, mostly by death, the Nuremberg Medical Code was adopted. This prohibits medical experimentation on any person without that person's unqualified consent. Included in medical experimentation would be mandating vaccination for vaccination for COVID-19 or mandating the wearing of a mask. The Nuremberg Code prohibits either of these without a person's consent. In the case of minors, the fully conscious consent of parents must be obtained in each instance. I have been informed that some of the Buchanan grade schools have been mandating masks without obtaining the consent of parents. This is a blatant violation of the Nuremberg Code. These grade school officials who have mandated this have joined the 15-year dictator of Germany in mandating medical experimentation without proper consent. They are violating a basic civil right of their students, a right that our country and its allies fought a bloody war, resulting in many deaths and permanent injuries to obtain. On top of that, they are creating lifelong physical and psychological harm to the students by mandating these masks. I'm asking the board to immediately cease and desist this mandating a mask at any of the Buchanan schools in violation of the Nuremberg Code, which visits physical and psychological damage upon the students. Failing that, you should all be removed from office by recall or at your next election.
All right. Thank you. All right, moving on to item I, adoption of the consent agenda. We have a motion, please.
I move the Board of Education approves the consent agenda for the regular board meeting of November 15th, 2021 be adopted as written. It includes the minutes from the October 18th regular meeting, the warrants, treasurer, and expenditure reports for October 2021, and recommendations to hire as submitted by Mrs. Dennison, Mr. Will, and Mr. Burgett. Those include Jennifer Rosveld, healthcare professional, Megan Hall, early childhood special education healthcare professional, Jennifer Templeton, administrative assistant to transportation operations and food service, and finally David Griswold, operations utility staff.
Support.
Good. All right, roll call.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Berry, yes. Mr. Carlson?
Yes.
Dr. Carlin?
Yes.
Dr. Ryder? Or,
Oh.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Ryder?
Goodness, thank you. Yes.
Dr. Burnett?
Yes. Moving on to item J1, certified staff maternity leave. May we have a motion, please?
I motion the Buchanan Board of Education grants maternity leave to Megan Watkins, Buchanan High School science teacher, from approximately February 28th, 2021 through the remainder of the 2021-22 school year. In accordance with Article 8, Section A.1.b, using accumulated sick days, barring any complications, she would return to her position as Buchanan High School science teacher at the beginning of the 2022-23 school year.
February 28, 2022.
22. With that amendment, do we have a
Got it.
support?
Support.
Okay,
As amended.
all right. And we wish them well and everything. Roll call.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Berry, yes. Mr. Carlson?
Yes.
Dr. Carlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Ryder?
Yes.
Dr. Burnett?
Yes. Moving on to item J2, crossing guard service agreement. May we have a motion, please?
I
Make-
motion.
Make a motion that the Buchanan Board of Education approves the proposed crossing guard service agreements as agreed between Buchanan Community Schools and the City of Buchanan, effective for the 2021-2022 school year.
Support.
Ms. Robinson?
Yep. And we thank you for your consideration for this. We do need it. And I know our students, we a way to keep our students safe, and families really appreciate this as well.
All right, roll call.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Berry? Yes. Mr. Carlson?
Yes.
Dr. Carlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Ryder?
Yes.
Dr. Burnett?
Abstain. All right. Moving on to item J3, school of choice. May I have a motion, please?
I motion the Buchanan Community Schools Board of Education, exercising the option permitted by Section 105 of the State School Aid Act of 1979, as amended by Public Act 300 of 1996, will accept applications of non-resident students who reside within Berry and Risa boundaries for the available grade level openings as listed below for enrollment into Buchanan Community Schools for the 2021-22 school year, and will operate a schools of choice program in our district in compliance with the statutory requirements of Section 105. The window for applications for these openings will be November 17th, 2021 to December 6th, 2021, and the available openings for each grade level are at Ottawa Elementary, 6 for both kindergarten and first grade, at Moccasin Elementary, 5 in second grade, 3 in third grade, 3 in fourth grade, at Buchanan Middle School, 4 in fifth grade, 7 openings in sixth grade, 2 in seventh grade, and at the high school, 8th grade 7, 9th grade 5, 10th grade 11, 11th grade 2 openings, and none in 12th grade.
Support.
And Ms. Robinson?
Just as a matter of just the process, we do have this open twice a year, and this will be our second time opening, having it open for the winter. We're also just excited to have as many opportunities for people to join Buchanan Community Schools, which is such a great place as possible. So,
Is that also the case for BVA that's open again?
it opens in the second semester, yes. So I know Mr. Fry was going to send out information before Christmas break. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Mrs. Robinson, can you talk just a little bit about the process that how you derive the numbers for each class?
So
is it a committee? Or is it just, anyways, go ahead.
So we communicate with the building principals, and based off of the numbers that are currently enrolled, determine how many we could actually have in each class. So it's really a collaboration between, and then there's a limit on the class sizes as well, so that's really what helps determine that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and this is after count day, just want to put that, so it's after count day, so we do have a definitive number of how many kids are in each class.
All right, roll call.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Berry, yes. Mr. Carlson?
Yes.
Dr. Carlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Ryder?
Yes.
Dr. Burnett?
Yes. Moving on to J4, Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll read the motion here. The Board of Education agrees to begin all board meetings by stating the Pledge of Allegiance.
Support.
Okay? And we've already discussed, so let's go ahead, roll call.
I just want to make one comment for Mr. Stubblefield. First of all, thank you for attending the last few meetings to bring this up. I just wanted to say something for the record that I guess I wish I would have said during the last meeting, which is that I just wanted for the record's sake, to let the public know that the board did not choose to say stop saying the pledge. Harvey, you've been on the board for how many years now?
I forgot.
Over 20 years, correct?
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct.
And like Harvey mentioned, they've never said the pledge, and I would, again, not having been part of those boards, but would assume that's not because you guys were all anti-pledge that entire
Correct.
time, or
Correct.
anti-patriotic. It's just something that didn't exist and never came up until
Correct.
Mr. Stubblefield brought it to our attention, which may not have been the first time it was brought to our attention, but it was the first time that I was aware it was brought to our attention. And within one meeting last month, as the open discussion occurred and we went down the line, everybody was, at least for the record then, and I have no idea how people are going to vote, but we're in favor verbally of your recommendation of giving the pledge. I also wanted to say publicly that there was conversation of, you know, hey, do we consider saying the pledge tonight? At least from my perspective. And that, that we came into tonight knowing that we would be voting for the pledge as Harvey mentioned earlier, it was on record that it was part of the agenda before the meeting began. So all that said, thank you again for, you know, attending these last few meetings. Even if that wasn't your initial intention for the first one you came to, I don't remember at this point. But we appreciate your consistency and continuing to show up.
All right.
Appreciate your comment and appreciate the quote.
All right. Roll call.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Berry, yes. Mr. Carlson?
Yes.
Dr. Carlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Ryder?
Yes.
Dr. Burnett?
Yes. All right. Moving on to item J5, banner purchase. May we have a motion, please?
I motion the Buchanan Board of Education approves Athletic Coordinator Mark Fry's recommendation to purchase replacement banners for the competition gym.
Support.
All right. Mrs. Robinson?
And looking at the banners that are in the gym, they do need to be replaced, so it's a good call on his end, so.
Okay. Roll call.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Berry, yes. Mr. Carlson?
Yes.
Dr. Carlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Ryder?
Yes.
Dr. Burnett?
Yes. Moving on to item J6, 2021-2022 extracurricular assignments. May we have a motion, please?
I move the Buchanan Board of Education approves the Buchanan Community Schools extracurricular assignments for 2021-22 school year.
Support.
Okay. And Ms. Robinson, these are regular routine?
It's a regular routine, yep, every year.
Okay. Any question, comments? All right, roll call.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Berry, yes. Mr. Carlson?
Abstain.
Dr. Carlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Ryder?
Yes.
Dr. Burnett?
Yes. Moving on to item J7, Neola, second reading. May we have a motion, please?
I motion the Buchanan Board of Education approves the second reading of the following Neola revised policy. Policy number 6421, purchases budgeted.
Very good.
Support.
All right. And this is the second reading, so we're formally adopting, so any questions? All right. Roll call.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Berry, yes. Mr. Carlson?
Yes.
Dr. Carlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Ryder?
Yes.
Dr. Burnett?
Yes. Moving on to item J8, Professional Development Advisory Committee approval. May we have a motion, please?
I move the Buchanan Board of Education approves the addition of a Professional Development Advisory Committee.
Support.
All right. And Ms. Robinson discussed that earlier in her presentation, so yes.
I would like to say that as a participant in PD days for many, many years, I applaud the fact that there is a committee and, you know, a plan. So thank you.
Roll call.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Berry? Yes. Mr. Carlson?
Yes.
Dr. Carlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Ryder?
Yes.
Dr. Burnett?
Yes.
Apparently, I want everyone to be doctors by then.
That's all right. Call everybody a doctor.
Handing out the
That's all right. Doctor. All right. All right, moving on to J9, 2021-2022 school calendar amendment.
I motion the Buchanan Board of Education approves the amended 2021-22 school calendar amendment recommended by the Buchanan 5C Education Association and Superintendent.
Support.
All right. And I think that was also mentioned earlier as well, so.
The only other thing I have to add to that is I know that this was a question that came up in one of the first meetings I attended, and I think it's nice that we're not waiting to make the change until the end of the school year, looking at next year, so I appreciate we tried it and adjusting along the way.
Agreed.
Yep.
There's nothing worse for a high school class to have, a high school teacher to have half-days.
Yep.
That's just, whoa. too much.
All right, roll call.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Berry, yes. Mr. Carlson?
Yes.
Dr. Carlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Ryder?
Yes.
Dr. Burnett?
Yes. Moving on to item K, question, comments from board members? None. And of course, police department's still recruiting for crossing guards, so if anybody can volunteer. Well, it's not volunteer, you get paid, but we're still
It's in
needing
the morning, right?
morning and afternoon,
Oh,
right?
that
'cause
morning part.
Yeah, morning and afternoons, sorry.
Okay.
And things, so. All right, with that said, our next regular board meeting is going to be December 13th, and then we do have a workshop on the bond. I think that's going to be after Thanksgiving on the 29th. And of course, you guys have a good holiday, since we won't be meeting until after that. So eat a lot and have fun.
Enjoy the turkey.
Enjoy, turkey, whatever you have. And we stand adjourned.